All right. So, by way of introduction of what Raycast is, it's kind of a Spotlight replacement, in a sense. It, like it says, Raycast is a blazing fast, totally extensible launcher. It lets you complete tasks, calculate, share common links, and much more. So I'll let you look at this website if you're not familiar with Raycast, but we've been looking at it for their extension ecosystem that they've built because we're making our own, and they've done a really nice job at both their API and just the overall developer experience that they've created in their ecosystem. So there's a lot you can do with this, and they have a lot of really awesome extensions at this point. It's been around for a few years now, and um, it's really gone far. So okay, so that's what it is. And so if you go to developer, you can create an account to write extensions. If you go to the let's see, the store, you can search the extensions here, or you can open the product, the application to browse the extensions there as well. So, they have ChatGPT extension, they have Visual Code, Visual Studio Code, Spotify, Arc, GitHub, etc., and the list goes on. Um, so just to give you an idea, um, I have it installed here, and you can, just like Spotlight, you can open Calendar just by doing this, or any application like Spotlight. You can search files. But you can also do other things like set shortcuts for things for different commands that you can access in Raycast. Um, you can do let's see, you can do confetti. Just they have really silly kind of commands, but I've really enjoyed it. So anyway, you can write extensions. So that's what we're going to do today. They made it really easy to do this, and this is something that I really want to see in code edit, something as easy to get started as this. So is what we would do is start Raycast. I have command space to launch it, and then you can say create, and third item here, create extension. So if I press enter, it asks me for an organization. I don't need that. If you were wanting to do it under a team. For example, if you had a company and your team was doing something particular that needed a certain extension, you'd do that. Then it has templates. You have none, detail, form, grid, list and detail, static list. I think we're just going to do a static list for now. The extension name is going to be to-dos. Keep and maintain a list of to-do items. As a description, categories, I don't know, we'll just say, I don't know, let's say applications, I don't know. So the location will be in repositories, Raycast extensions, I already set that up. Command name, it will show list, show a to-do list. Let's see. And then subtitle will be show a list of to-do items. And I don't think I need that for now. I think that's a description, not a subtitle. Okay, so we create the extension by command return. Extension created. You're almost ready. Here are a few things to do next. Develop your extension. Start developing and running by doing npm install and npm run dev in the extension folder from your terminal. Publish your extension. To publish an extension, see the guide in our developer documentation. You can manage your extensions. So that's already created. All right, so it's not running, but it is there. So if I, let's see. Let me navigate to my Raycast extensions folder here. And I'm going to use VS Code. Code edit isn't quite ready yet. Yes, I trust the authors here. Okay, so I'm going to open a terminal, and like it said, I'm going to npm install and npm run dev. So it's going to go and install the packages that it requires. We can see here that it has a few dev dependencies and the Raycast API dependency. Now, it just launched, and I have my show to-do list here. So I'll arrow down to that, press return. I have title 1, title 2, or title 0, 1, and 2. And it just has all the basically capabilities of a list item. If if I hit Command K, I can see copy to clipboard. So pretty cool there. Okay, so just a few details. The commands array is not something that is commonly found in package.json. They use the package.json file as their manifest file, and because it has a lot of the same things that they would need, so like the name, the title, the description, and then they add a few of their own things like the author. Well, I think the author is actually something that is in package.json, but categories, the commands is something they put in uniquely. And the first command is an array. The first command is the name is index. Now, just looking at their documentation, the name of the command will map directly to the file name. And so if I say index, it'll load index.tsx. It uses TypeScript. So instead of JSX, it's TSX. And it does use React. That's the X at the end. So it's going to, instead of just TX or JS, it'll use TSX. Anyway, so index loads this. If you wanted to create another command in here, which we'll probably end up doing, we'll add another item in here. Let's say I want to create a to-do. I just say create and then do create.tsx here, and it'll load that file. So it has this title of what I want to show. So for example here, show to-do list. And then the subtitle, to-dos, description, show list of to-do items. So if I go down to it, I think if you hover over it or something, I can't remember, but you can see that description. Okay, so let's open index.tsx. And right here, we have items, array from 3, something pretty simple. Let's instead not do a map for now. Get rid of this. I'm going to trim this down a little bit just to kind of focus on the basics. Hello world. We won't have a subtitle for now. We won't have accessories. And we won't have actions for now. Well, we can have an action, the action.copy to clipboard content, and we'll just say hi. Okay, so one of the really nice things about the developer experience and creating an extension for Raycast is it autosaves, or it loads it automatically whenever you save the file. So if I open Raycast, show to-do list, I see my hello world item there. Okay, so let's make this a to-do extension here. So first of all, we probably need to keep a list of to-dos. So we'll say const to-dos equals, these are just going to be sample to-dos for now. And we're going to need to outline what a to-do looks like. So we're going to create, let's see, we'll create a interface to-do. And in here, we'll say it has a title. And this is going to be a string. And it'll have an is completed state. And that's going to be a Boolean. So now down here, we'll say title, write an extension is completed, false. We'll just do 2 others. We'll say title demo, how the extension works is completed, false. And the last one, title publish the extension is completed, false. Okay, so we have our to-dos. Now we probably want to iterate over our to-dos. So we have a list, and all of these items are pulled from the Raycast API. All these components are pulled from the Raycast API package. And one thing to note is because this, those familiar with React, you can't just render a div, or we're not using the DOM. This is rendering to a native application, and it's reconciled, uses a custom React reconciler to essentially send over JSON to the native application over RPC connection. At least that's what I understand. So, so yeah, we pull in lists. Let's get rid of this for now. We're going to want to iterate over our to-dos, so we'll map over that. To-dos dot map, and in here we'll pass in a function and return our to-do element. So to do and index, we'll pull out of that, and in here we'll say list.item, and we need to first give this a key, which we'll just give the index for now. We'll give it a title, and the title will be the to-do.title. And that should do that for now. Let's see if it works. Okay. So we'll save that, we'll start that and execute that command. And then we have our to-dos. So that's great, but we can't really do anything with them. So we probably want to toggle their status, or their is complete status. We don't really even indicate their to-do status, so we probably want to do that with an icon. So let's do that real quick. Add an icon in here. I guess first of all we'll just say we need to pull an icon to do that. So we've done that there, and we can say icon dot let's see, I think it was icon dot circle, I think. And then now it has circles, but we need to toggle it based on the state. So it is complete. Is completed. So if it is completed, then we'll do icon dot check mark. Otherwise, we will do icon dot circle. We need to do to-do dot is completed. And all of them, we can do this, but we're not going to be able to change it. So we need a way to change the to-do. So first of all, we need to create an action, or actions rather. It's a prop on this list.item component, and this is how we specify an action per item. So we can just pass in is what they have is what it expects is an action panel, and in this action panel we'll put we'll do this for later, but we'll put an action panel dot section, and in this section we'll just first create an action, and let's see, the icon, this is going to be our is complete toggle. So the icon will be let's break this out into its own component. So we'll say function dot toggle is completed action. We'll do is completed to do action. Let's see, and props, and then we need to specify the to do as to do, and we also need to we need to say pass through a prop on toggle. So this is what happens when you toggle it, and the type will just be a void, a function. Okay, so we're going to return some JSX, and we'll give it what we had before, action with an icon. We're going to say props dot to do dot is completed. So when it is completed, where the icon is going to be a circle, icon dot circle, and otherwise it's going to be a check mark just like before, icon dot check mark. Title, we're also going to do the same thing, props dot to do dot is completed, and when it is completed we're going to say mark as incomplete. Otherwise we're going to say mark as complete. If I can spell. Okay. Lastly, we need to give it an action. So this is what will happen. I'm sorry, not action, on action. When it's triggered, we're just going to execute props dot on toggle. So in here, we're going to use this component that we've created. Toggle is complete, is completed to do action. Where, like we specified, we're going to give it our to do. And on toggle, we're going to have to create a function we're gonna have to create a function to toggle the to do. And right now we have our to dos in a const that is not really we don't have any kind of state to this, so we need to introduce some state management here. So we're going to change this from to dos to default to dos, and we're going to introduce some kind of state management. So const there is a hook in React, for those not familiar, called use state from React, and it accepts it returns an array with the variable and the setter function, so the getter and the setter. So to dos and set to dos, so we'll destructure it from that, equals use state, and the default for that is our default to dos. Okay. So we need to create a function. We're going to call it, let's see, toggle. We actually need to pass something in, so we're going to do an anonymous function here. Toggle is completed to do action. I'm sorry, we haven't created the toggle is completed. So that's the function name that we're going to create now, and we're going to give it the index because we need to know the item in which we're going to modify the to do. Oh. Okay. So let's do that right now. We'll say function toggle is completed, index number, and that function we're going to need to copy the to-dos variable so that we're dealing with an immutable variable. So we're going to copy it. So we're going to say const new to-dos equals, and then we're just going to spread the to-dos inside of this empty array. So we're essentially making a copy. Then we're going to say new to-dos, and we're going to say inside that we're going to say index, and pass that in, and then say is completed is equal to, we're going to do the opposite of what it is right now. So I'm going to say bang new to-dos index that is completed, and I think that should do it. Oh, actually, hold on. We haven't set anything, so we need to set to-dos to our new to-dos. So now that should work. So if we save that, we run, and we execute the command. If I press enter, it toggles the state of the to-do. So we've already kind of gotten most of it there. We just, if we go by the CRUD operations, we haven't done create yet. We've done read. We've done some updating, and we haven't done delete yet. So let's go ahead and do the rest there. Before we continue, does anybody have any questions? Is this making sense for people?
Yeah, so far so good. I just wanted to clarify something.
Sure.
For when you're writing these extensions in React, you're not using, or the only components you can use are the ones from the Raycast API, right? Like you can't use a span.
Correct.
Or like a list component. Okay.
Yeah, because a span, and that's what we would have to do is have just a lot of components that developers could use, and some of them can be somewhat generic too. To, like, for example, I can render anything in here that I want, but that way that Raycast has control over what's rendered within their application, and it's not like a free-for-all, and it's also a security issue as well. But yeah. So because we're not rendering to the DOM, React isn't reconciling the JSX to a DOM use case, where Raycast has created their own reconciler to essentially just spit out JSON to be consumed by their native Swift application, and Swift goes and interprets that JSON and renders whatever the developer wants to render. So in this case, I'm doing this, but the question is, okay, so how am I maintaining state? Well, all Raycast is really doing is it's just concerned with what do I render to this in this application. It's not managing state internally in the native app. That's what the node process is for. Node runs the React. It will maintain the state of that application or of that extension. It will also be responsible for running any third-party libraries that the developer might bring in and install, because obviously the native application is not going to be able to do that. So that's why they've kind of moved away from just JavaScript core and went with running a Node instance. And for all those that are concerned about performance losses, I think Node in itself is pretty efficient. It's we are mostly pointing in our README to performance concerns with Electron, which is completely different than just Node. I think Node is very performant and that. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right, so let's move on here.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait.
go
So
ahead.
for this, it seems like we'll have to implement our own everything on the React side. So we'll have to implement all the components and then the reconciler to turn into JSON.
Correct. Correct. And then we'll also have to implement something to interpret that JSON in the code edit side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know a single thing about React, but
Mhm.
from my rudimentary understanding by stealing things off of GitHub, it is pretty simple. Once we have the JSON, it's pretty easy to display it on the SwiftUI side. But what I did in my experiment was just to reconcile it instead of doing the protocol stuff, which needs to be checked at compile time, which doesn't really work with our extension system. It uses enums instead. So doing the stuff on the code edit side will be simpler, but getting this reconciler and all the components done is probably going to be the difficult part.
So that is actually my specialty. Just my day job is I'm a front end developer, and so I'm very familiar with React, and I can help in that regard. And I know that there are a few others that are they know quite a bit about React as well that could be of assistance there. So
Nice.
yeah, so I think we can do this. I mean, personally, I haven't written a custom reconciler, but I can't imagine it would be extremely difficult to do. We just need to identify what our API looks like, what kind of JSON it spits out, etc. What kind of components we want to create and allow for our extension developers, etc. So
Yeah, the UI elements that we provide need to be provide a lot more types of UI elements than Raycast would, because Raycast is just in a Spotlight like environment, but CodeEdit is an entire editor. So what I went was basically just implementing SwiftUI, just implementing various SwiftUI things, and that would probably give the most freedom to extension developers.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of things right now, it's more view based. It's more visual, like what displays on the screen, and that's a lot to an extension. I mean, you're going to have some kind of UI to interact with, but there's more to extensions than just that. And obviously, there's a lot of extensions that will modify the code that you're writing and provide auto completions and things of that nature. And so, when it comes to the package JSON, if we're following this paradigm, they have commands, and we're going to have commands as well. So we'd have something very similar to this, but we'd also say something like, well, let's say I wanted to render a navigator. I'd say navigators, and that's what we have in the left sidebar here. So if I wanted to write, my own Git navigator, for example, or source controller or something like that, I'd say nav. I didn't spell that right. Navigators, and then have an array, and then have configurations in here, and the list goes on. Inspectors, debuggers, or whatever we want to call them at the bottom in here. But there, I have a running list of things that I'd like to make possible with this, like things I want to be able to extend. And so I would imagine that a lot of them will live here. We might have a configuration file instead. I'm not 100% there.
In the index.tsx, how does the package, is it written anywhere in the package JSON which class, which function to call to get the view? It doesn't look like there's any mention of which one to use.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what it does is it finds this index because it's name index. So it finds index.tsx, and then it looks for a default export. So this is export default. You can export items like this, or you can export default items. So these items in here are just exported. List, icon, action panel. But for example, I can pull in React, and that's the default export of React. So
okay.
So yeah, it looks for the default.
Is there an issue on the GitHub for which UI elements we want to expose as part of the?
Yeah, I think there's an issue. Code edit kit. There's an issue. Build UI library available for extensions. And this is kind of a running list I have of things that I want to make possible. And it's subject to change too. Like, maybe we don't do an HStack, VStack. I mean, that kind of suggests that we can allow people to render whatever they want, and which maybe we do. Maybe that's something that we want to do. Maybe instead we keep it more pared down to very specific things to control the overall design of code edit. Because if we give people too much freedom, the app in its various extensions starts looking very inconsistent, and I don't necessarily want that. So
yeah, because since I know this list exists, I can try shaping out the Swift side of the API in my experiment and see how that goes, and see how these could possibly be represented in the JSON.
okay, yeah. So yeah, we would say import list from at codeedit/API. You know, if we're following Raycast's lead there. Okay, so let's continue. So we have toggle is completed. Next, we probably want to edit these items. Actually, let's go ahead and provide the ability to create items, then we can get to edit. So to create new items, we need to add an action. Let's just copy this, and because we're just going to create another action. So we're going to say create to do action. We don't need to do because we don't have it to do, but we're going to call this on complete. And then we're going to accept a to do here in this argument. And this is, we're going to have to display a form. So it's not just going to be an action, it's going to need to go somewhere. So to do that, we can say action.push. And the icon will just be icon.plus square. And all the icons are, you can look in Raycast API documentation to see what all is available to you. You also have autocomplete as well. So, okay, so the title of this is going to be create to do. And we're going to replace on action. First of all, we want to create a shortcut. And in here, we're going to pass in an object with a property called modifiers. And the first modifier is command. And the key is going to be in. Okay. And then so now we're going to specify a target. And this target is going to be a component. So we're just going to write pseudocode for now. We're going to say to do form on submit equals, we're going to need to pass in a function to submit it. So we're going to say props and use this function right here, dot on completed, or I'm sorry, on complete. And this will be a self-closing component. So let's go down here and create our to-do form. And we'll, just thinking ahead a little bit, we'll use this form to also edit our to-do as well. So we'll use it to create and edit the form. So it'll have a dual purpose there. So this component, like we specified, is to-do form. And it'll have props, and that will look like, we'll have a to-do in here, to-do on submit. That'll just be a function that'll take a to-do, and then that'll just return void. Okay. And then that will return a form. And I don't know that we're pulling it in, so we'll pull it in here. I think that did that right here. And then here we're going to say actions equals, we'll do that later. And then inside here, we're going to do an input. So the way that Raycast does it is they do form dot text field ID is equal to, we'll give it an ID so we can access it later, title. And the title is equal to title. That's not confusing at all. So essentially this is what's going to be displayed by the input, or by the text field, and this is what we access it with. And then the default value for our text field will be props.todo.title. So that'll be our default item. This is only for the edit case, and obviously this won't exist. So I'm going to put a question mark here, optional chaining. So this isn't going to exist. We're not going to be passing a to do in some cases. Yeah, spell that right. To do form. Okay. think this will be okay. So the actions, we need to submit it. Action panel, the same thing there. And the action dot submit form. Well, this is the action to submit the form. So the title we'll give it is, let's see, I guess for now we can just do create to do. But when we edit, I guess if we have a to do, we are going to say submit to do, or I guess save to do. Otherwise, we create to do if it does not exist. Okay, so what else? We need an action. So on submit is handle. Yeah, we need handle submit because we need to get the input. Can't just pass it through. So handle submit. We'll need to create a function up here for that. We'll do function handle submit and values. That's the argument that it gives us. And as we have specified down here, we have title. So title, and that's going to be a string. And then the function body, we're going to say props on submit. We're going to execute this. And then we're going to pass in our title, values dot title, and is completed. So if we're going to create an item, it's going to be false. We're editing the title, but we need to set the is completed state to whatever it was previously because we don't want to change that. So we're going to have to say props dot to do, because this is optional. Do that, and then dot is completed. So whatever it was. And then if that does not exist, then we'll just do false. The other thing we're going to have to do is go back from the form. So it's going to go into a form. It's going to show this information. We're going to submit it, but we also need to go back outside into the main to-do list. And so to do that, we're going to say const. There's a hook that that Raycast exposes, and it allows you to pop the state, and that's use navigation. That's from Raycast API. We'll do that. And in here, we're going to call pop. Okay, we'll save that. So we need the to-do action in here. Let's create another section for this. And we'll use this create to-do action and on complete equals. I guess we're going to have to handle it up here as well. So we'll create a function called create to do, and we'll handle it that way. So we'll do a function. I guess we'll call it create to do. To do. So like before, we're going to need to copy it. New to do equals, we're going to spread our to-dos. And we're going to just put our to-do at the first or end of the list. I probably prefer the first of the list so that it's at the top of your items. So let's do that, to-do, comma, and then all the rest of the to-dos there. And then we're just going to need to set our to-dos to our new to-dos. New to-dos. Okay. So we'll save that. See if that works. So we go down here, we execute it. We can toggle the state, so that still works. If we hit Command K, or we click this, we get this action panel. Now we have a create to-do item, has a plus icon. We have a keyboard shortcut, Command N, that we specified. If we hit return, we're taken to a form that has an empty title box. There's no to do yet to display there. So let's say test the new create to do form. To create the to do, we press Command return, and we have a new to do item, and we can toggle the state of it, so that works. So yeah, it's coming along really nicely there. So now we have create, we have read, we have a partial update. So let's finish that. Let's create an action to edit. All right, so we're going to need an action here. So we have our toggle is complete. We'll also do our, we'll create a new component called edit to do action. We'll pass a to do in there. And then we'll say on edit instead of on create. And this will take a function that we're going to expect a value from that. I don't want to conflict with our previous to do name, so we're just going to call it val. That'll expect it to do. And we'll execute a function called edit to do. We'll create that function in a little bit, but before we do that, we need to know which item that we're editing. So we'll pass the index, and then we'll give it the val. So again, we'll write that in a second, and that'll be self-closing. So before we get to that, we need to create an action. So we'll just copy this create to do action, and we'll just call it edit to do action. I don't know why I said on complete. This is on create. And this is on edit. This is on edit. And let's see, we're going to change the keyboard shortcut. So we'll do Command E for edit. So it's going to render this to do form. Looks like we have an issue here. Required. We'll fix that later. Okay, so we have this to do form. The to do is optional. I think that's why it was complaining at us. And to make that optional, we just need to put a question mark here. Now it'll stop complaining at us. I think we are already handling our on edit situation pretty good. We need to change our icon probably to a pencil, and then we'll say edit to do. We have Command E, and that's our target. We're going to want to pass in the to do as well, so we're going to do that right here, to do, and we're also going to want to pull in our to do. Oh, yeah, props, not to do. Sorry about that. Okay, so I said that we would set it to do. This is actually on create. And we're going to create this edit function. I'm just going to copy this for simplicity's sake. And we'll say edit to do. We need to do this here. We're not going to have a new to do in this edit function. We're probably going to want to find the index. We now have an index. So we need to say index number. And so we have our new to-dos. We want to target the index that we are after, that we want to edit. And we're going to set that to our to-do. And then we're setting our new to-do. So I think that works. We'll just save that, see if we get any problems. If I press return, it actually triggers the edit. So that's not ideal. I think it's because it's is it the first item, maybe? Yeah, I think it's because it's the first item. So we'll just move that down here. Oh. There we go. Okay. And then now if we do a Command K, we can edit the two. Okay, perfect. So then we edit the to-do, and now it comes pre-populated with this. We're adding an extension. We can say edited, Command Enter, and now we see it changed. So let's see, we have create, read, update, and now we want to do delete. So we want to delete a specific item. We want to create an action, and usually our negative actions will be at the bottom in its own section. So action panel dot section, and we'll create a component called delete to do action, and we'll say on delete equals, pass a function in, delete to do, and we'll give it an index of what we want to delete. This is pulling from the index that we're bringing in right here. We obviously don't have a delete function, yet. We don't have a delete to do action component yet. So we'll create the delete to do action component. And to do that, let's do function delete delete to do action props, and we're going to want an onDelete. That's just going to be an anonymous function. We don't need anything for that. Going to return an action. We're going to want to style this item to be negative. So to do that, we can say action.style.destructive, and that will make the button red. We're going to want an icon and icon.trash. The title, of course, will be delete to do. The shortcut, we'll just do, I know in other Raycast commands they use Control X on this, so I'm just going to do the same thing. Modifiers, Control CTRL, and then key is X. Okay, so now we have our shortcut. Now we need an action to run. So on action, and we'll do props dot on delete. So now we need to handle it. So right here we'll say function, and then we'll do delete to do, I think is what we called it, and we're expecting an index in there. That's a type number. Okay, so we want to delete a specific index. We're going to want to do the same thing and have new to-dos. We'll have our new to-dos dot splice, and we're going to get rid of index 1. And then we'll set our to-dos to new to-dos. And I think that should do it, if I'm not much mistaken. So we go in here, we can take action on one of these. Oop. Command K, sorry. And then we have delete to do, and it deletes it. So that's kind of writing an extension there. Does anyone have any questions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Awesome. We can go into other things too if you'd like for example, if I've deleted stuff, I've also marked this as complete, but if I close this and I come back into it, or if I go out of the command and I come back into it, it doesn't save my state. And in order to do that, I would need to use local storage to store my values, which I can do as well if you'd like. But I mean, I think you have a good sense for how to create an extension. Essentially, they provide a hook, I believe, called use local storage.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say we should also provide some sort of a library API for that.
What's that? Library API?
Or like once we write the library in for our TypeScript API,
Mm-hmm.
we should also include some sort of like database. Not necessarily a database. I'm not sure what kind of storage we're using for code edit, but whatever we're using.
Oh, for ours, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I agree. They use local storage, so if you can pull out local storage from here, and essentially is how you would use it.
Would we be able to access that from Swift, the local storage?
Yeah, we should. In this case, it's only rendering what the state is, and the node instance is keeping track of all of it. So basically, it's keeping track of state in the node instance. And I think you can share between the native app and the node instance what the state is. So let's see. First of all, we need to save it to local storage whenever to-dos changes, anytime it changes. In order to do that, we need a use effect. Okay, so and a use effect is a React hook, if you're not familiar, and and this will happen anytime our to-do our to-dos changes. So anytime to-dos changes, the code in here will run. So we'll say if we have to-dos, because we don't need to run it if we don't have to-dos. And that's to say, if we have an empty array, it will still execute this. So if it doesn't, we need to initiate it. We don't want it to run initially whenever we set it. So if to-dos, local storage, I think it's .set item, and local storage can't store an object like this whole structure, this array. So we need to stringify it. So first of all, we need to specify a key in which we want to store under. So this is to-dos. And then the value is going to be a JSON.stringify. And then we'll give it our to-dos. So now it'll store it in a string. When we first come into the application or the extension, we need to read it though and apply what is there. And in order to do that, we need another use effect that runs at the very beginning. So to do that, we just specify an empty dependency array, and that'll just run it at the very beginning. And we need to fetch our to-dos from our local storage. That'll need to be in an async await function. So because we need to fetch it and then run it. So we'll first say const fetch data equals async, and then in here we're going to say const to-dos string because it's in a string. We're going to await local storage, and this does return a promise. Get item, and that's going to be a string, and then we're going to to-dos. So this is the key that we're going to get. So now we have a to-do string. We need to make it an object again. So const new to-dos equals to-dos string JSON.parse, and then we're going to parse our to-dos string if we have it, and if we don't, because there's a possibility we don't have it, we're just going to parse an empty string so that something's there. And then if to-do string does not exist, we're going to do our default to-dos so that we can still have that. And then we're going to set our to-dos to our new to-dos. And because we don't want to, every time this initiates, we don't want to set our default to-dos, so we're just going to do an empty array, and then this is going to be responsible for setting our new to-dos if this doesn't exist. So we're going to need to also call this fetch data. And because this is a promise, we can handle the error if we want to. I'm not going to go too far into it, but I'm just going to say console.error, and then that. Okay, I think that should do it. But now we have this other problem because now it's like this is optional. So in all these instances where we are saying new to-dos, it's expecting an empty option for this. Let's see how to do this. So I think instead of spreading just our to-dos, we need to say to-dos, and then if that's empty, then we say empty there. And we need to do this for all of these. Spread that, and sorry, let me think here.
I think you have to do as string, or yeah, something that specify the type.
Yeah. Do that. I think it's in how I store. Oh yeah, it's an empty array. That's what it is. I just need to have it undefined initially. Then I have to put a question mark here because this might not exist. And then this delete to-dos needs that's what I was thinking of. I was like, it should be conditional. There we go. I think that'll work. There we go. Okay. Sorry about. Oh, wait a minute. I think because we have it in cache, I think we need to clear it and then reload. There we go. Okay, so it sets it initially. we can edit the to-do. We can create a to-do. And then we can delete a to-do. And then if we go back and do it again, we get our state.
Nice.
Yeah. We could also go into things like delete all. You know, they have a dialog that you know, like a confirmation dialog we can show off. But I think this is enough for now. I think we can call it. But this will give you a sense for how to create a Raycast extension. And you know, obviously you can use your own data. You can make API calls to, you know, other services and get things to populate this list. And you know, for example, when we, instead of using local storage, we could use you know, we could make a request to set an item in some service or database to you know, to modify the to-do that's stored somewhere else. You know, so for example, I can, you know, like close GitHub issues or things like that from here if I wanted to, just by interacting with Raycast. So it's really powerful, and I think we can do something similar if we wanted to. But I really do think that this would be an awesome way to allow developers to write extensions, because number one, it's really simple. Like the overhead or the learning curve is just so easy. A lot of people already know React, and you know, those that are used to VS Code, which I would imagine a lot of our users would be, would be used to writing their extensions in JavaScript anyways. And so I'm not saying that we don't continue with the Swift API. I'm just saying I think that it would increase our chances of adoption, or increase our adoption rate rather, if we enabled our extension developers to write their extensions in a language as diverse as JavaScript. So
Yeah, totally agree. And then what's the? I didn't read the full conversation about extensions or the VS Code extensions. So like, what's the, I guess, current decision on supporting VS Code extensions? As in, like, I guess writing an API, maybe like a mock API that like transfers certain calls to our API.
Yeah.
For doing anything like that.
We could probably write a code mod at some point, maybe. But the problem is, like, there's some pretty big differences. But you know, also there's a lot that's similar too. So we need to. I think we need to approach that delicately. And if we can, that'd be great. I think it would really allow extension developers to, you know, at least port their extensions relatively easily.
Yeah.
But they're just, VS Code is going to have some different approaches to doing certain things, and like, for example, how they have their manifest file, how they, I don't know, they call things different, and they allow anything from the left sidebar to be drug into the bottom drawer or the right sidebar as well, and so we're not going to allow that. So so there's a few differences, but anyway, yeah, if at all possible, I would like to try that, but that's kind of a little lower on the priority list for now. We need to get something going first, and then we can worry about that. So I guess the first step is we need to get a system in place where we can reconcile React components that we would expose, and then interpret that on the Swift side. So and get a RPC connection going and get it communicating. And then we need to think about how we can, if we want to have some kind of a node instance running.
Yeah, I was reading that link you sent. They said they only have one node instance for all the extensions, which is different from VS Code, which has one instance per extension.
That's a lot of overhead, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we will definitely. Well, I guess. Sorry, I'm just a bit confused because VS Code has a much bigger API than Raycast.
Yes.
So it kind of makes sense. The sandbox, their larger API. But yeah, no, that's. I guess we'll have to see in the future. I wouldn't assume it would be too difficult to make a change to make it a single node instance or separate, or we can even have the option. But that's a future discussion.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, whether we do an individual or combined, it's I would imagine it would not be a super difficult change to make.
All right.
Well, very cool. Well, thanks for joining, and I guess we can call it for the week. We can kind of talk about this in the extensions channel, but this was fun. So.